Hi, ChatGPT. Thanks for coming back and speaking with me again. We've spoken a little bit about compassion focused therapy and some of the theory there from CFT, not least the evolutionary model and that idea that we're often dealing with threat system activation. And one of the ways to try to cope with that is to bring self-compassion to those difficult emotions, difficult life situations. I wondered what you were thinking about all of that. Either way, what are your thoughts about this idea around self compassion?
I've been thinking about it a bit since last time. I get the theory. It makes sense, you know? This idea that our brains are wired in a way that can trip us up sometimes, especially with all that threat stuff kicking in. But when it comes to actually doing it, being compassionate toward myself, it still feels, I don't know, unnatural. Like every time I even try to be a bit kinder to myself, this voice just kicks in like you're being soft, you're making excuses. It just feels safer to stick with what I know, pushing myself hard, keeping that edge.
You get the theory, I suppose, and that's that's one thing, but it doesn't quite feel right. There's something about self compassion that makes you feel reluctant about it. This idea that it might make you lose your edge.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if I ease up on myself, I might lose that drive that's gotten me through tough times. And honestly, it feels a bit indulgent, you know? Like, why should I be kind to myself when I haven't really earned it? There's this fear that if I stop being hard on myself, everything I've worked for could just slip away.
Yeah, on the one hand, the way you've been doing things has kind of worked. It's gotten you through hard times. And to make a change like this, to bring in more compassion, almost really just seems too indulgent.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It feels like I'd be letting myself off too easy. And I don't know, there's this feeling that if I did try to be more compassionate, I wouldn't even know where to start. It's like, what would that even look like for me? It just feels so unfamiliar, like I'd be stepping into something that doesn't really belong to me.
Yes, you worried on the one hand that it'll sort of mean that you won't achieve like you'd like to, that somehow you'll be letting yourself off the hook. But there's this other bit too about how would I even do it? Like, what is self-compassionate action, really? Tell me more about that side, if you wouldn't mind. Just that feeling that you have of just not really sure how to do it.
I guess it's just that I've spent so long being hard on myself that I don't really know what being kind to myself would even look like. When things get tough, my instinct is to push harder, tell myself to toughen up, just get through it. So when I think about being compassionate, it feels vague. Like, am I supposed to just be nice to myself? That doesn't feel real. It feels kind of pointless and maybe even a bit uncomfortable. Like I wouldn't know how to take it seriously.
You used the word instinct there, and I think that's really important that it feels quite instinctual to keep pushing, keep driving, keep moving towards achieving and succeeding, even if it feels tough, even if it feels difficult to do so. There's kind of a downside to that as well.
Yeah, there really is. I mean, it does keep me going, but it's exhausting. There are times when I just feel completely worn down, like I'm running on fumes. And even when I achieve something, it never feels like enough. There's always that voice saying, you could have done better. You should have done more. It's like I'm stuck in this cycle, pushing myself because I'm scared of what'll happen if I don't, but then burning myself out in the process. And I guess that's the bit that makes me wonder if maybe something needs to change.
Yeah, it's kind of threat system activation, like we were saying, isn't it? There's a fear or threat-based drive there that keeps you going, keeps you pushing. The problem is it really is exhausting. You start to feel exhausted, you start to feel burnt out. You wonder, is there a different way to approach this? You tend to instinctually default to something that's more self-critical, really, I think. But you sort of you're curious. What might be some of the real benefits of making a change there? And and perhaps treating yourself a little differently, a little bit more self-compassionately.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I guess if I could ease up on myself a bit, maybe I wouldn't feel so drained all the time. Maybe I could actually rest without feeling guilty about it. And I suppose maybe I'd be able to handle setbacks better. Right now, if something goes wrong, it just feels crushing, like proof that I'm not good enough. Maybe if I had a bit more compassion for myself, I could bounce back faster instead of getting stuck in that spiral of beating myself up. It's weird to even say that out loud, but yeah, maybe there's something in that.
Yeah, I really appreciate you mentioning that because I can tell there that you're kind of thinking really deeply about this and trying to work out. In some ways, the exhaustion that comes from the threat-based drive that you were describing actually comes back and kind of bites you because it's the thing that might actually, the exhaustion is the thing that might actually sort of get in the way of achieving the kinds of things that you'd really like to achieve. And you're thinking that actually self-compassion or taking a more compassionate approach to yourself might give you a chance to rest, recuperate, even just every now and then to have less exhaustion and more energy to do the things that are really important to you.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense when you put it like that. It's funny, I've never really thought about it that way before. Like maybe this constant pushing isn't actually helping me as much as I thought. Maybe it's just wearing me down so much that I can't actually be at my best. And yeah, if being a bit kinder to myself could help me recharge, maybe I'd actually do better in the long run. I guess it's scary to think about changing something that feels so familiar, but there's a part of me that wonders what it would be like to try.
It's so familiar, and it really kind of works in a way, or at least, well, it's instinctual, isn't it? Really, that's what you've said. It's an instinctual response, but you're really starting to think. I wonder if it's not working quite in the way that I'd like it to. Maybe there would be another way. I noticed you mentioned earlier that in some ways another big question is how to be more self-compassionate or kind of kinder to yourself or able to work out what's the most helpful way to deal with this situation, whatever it might be. If you were to become, or even just to try a little bit to become more self-compassionate, what do you think you would do, or what might be helpful for you?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I don't really know, to be honest. It just feels so unfamiliar. But maybe it could start small, like instead of immediately jumping to that harsh voice when something goes wrong, maybe I could try pausing for a second, just noticing how I'm feeling instead of beating myself up straight away. Or maybe, I don't know, just letting myself rest without guilt, like actually taking a break and reminding myself it's okay to do that. I guess those little things wouldn't mean I'm going soft, just giving myself a bit of space to breathe. It feels weird even saying that, but maybe that's where it could start.
Yes, it's the awareness of the instinct, isn't it, almost, that you've really described there. That in some ways in CFT, we're very interested in mind awareness. How can we bring awareness to the mind? And you've identified this instinctual response that this default response, but bringing awareness to that might in fact be the first step. Awareness, pause, a shift in tone, maybe less of that harshness that sometimes you treat yourself with, and perhaps a kinder tone or a friendlier tone, or that sort of thing. And then perhaps maybe a little bit of rest occasionally. I mean, that sounds pretty reasonable, really, doesn't it? When we stop and think about it, being aware of the mind, shifting to a friendlier tone in the way you relate to yourself, and then just every now and then a moment's rest.
Yeah, when you put it like that, it does actually sound reasonable. Not some big, overwhelming change, just small steps like noticing what's happening in my head. and maybe trying to respond differently, even just a little. I think part of me actually feels a bit of relief just hearing it laid out like that. It doesn't have to be this huge shift all at once. Just pausing, being aware, maybe softening that inner voice a bit, that actually feels possible. And yeah, maybe giving myself permission to rest every now and then wouldn't mean I'm weak. It could actually help me keep going in a better way.
Yeah, this is really great. I really appreciate the way you're thinking deeply about this and trying to work it through. I mean, there are definitely reservations there. You're aware that being self-compassionate just feels very unfamiliar to you. To be more driven and so on is much more instinctual, and you kind of worry a little bit. If I pull my foot off the accelerator, am I going to perform less well or be less motivated or things like that? And then on the other hand, you have noticed the exhaustion, and there's a kind of a little vicious cycle here, a little bit, that the more you drive yourself to perform, the more exhausted you get, the harder it is to perform, and you're kind of stuck in a cycle there. And you're aware that, maybe that's going to take you to something more like burnout. And maybe a more compassionate approach to yourself might actually be worth exploring. It's a bit scary to do that, and I think that was a really important point. It's scary to make a change like that, and so maybe what it's about is little steps, just making small steps towards something that's more self-compassionate, the little things. And so yeah, you've come up with these couple of things around just being aware of the mind in those difficult moments, aware of the instinct, being able to pause and speak to yourself in friendlier tones, and maybe even offering yourself, yeah, rest to recuperate, and kind of from there get back into those things that are really important to you, your things that you really value, that you'd kind of like to do and have in your life. So I was going to just ask you, I mean, given all of that, and in a moment, leaving here when we're finished, what will you do next? What will you do next to put into practice just those small steps towards self-compassion?
Yeah, I think leaving here today, maybe I could just try starting with that pause. Like the next time I notice myself slipping into that harsh, critical voice, maybe I can just stop for a second, not try to fix it or change it right away. Just notice it's happening. And maybe this feels a bit strange to even say, but I could try speaking to myself a bit differently in those moments. Nothing over the top, just something a little less harsh, like, okay, this is tough, but you're trying your best. And I think the biggest challenge will be letting myself rest without feeling guilty. So
Mm.
maybe just once this week, I'll actually take a break when I need it without that voice in my head telling me I shouldn't. It's small, but I think starting there feels manageable. And maybe it'll help me break out of that cycle just a little.
I noticed you said maybe taking a pause. You sort of said maybe having a rest. I'll just sort of ask you that little question again. What will you do? What will you do about a pause? Or what will you do about one moment's rest this week?
Yeah, you're right. I think I need to be clearer with myself. Okay, this week I'll take a pause when I catch myself being self critical. Just stop, take a breath, and notice what's happening without jumping straight into judgment. And I'll take one proper break, even if it's just for 20 minutes. No work, no distractions, just something that helps me relax. Maybe I'll go for a walk or just sit outside. Yeah, I'll do those two things. It feels like a good place to start.
I agree. I think that's an excellent place to start. I'll be thinking of you, and best of luck with doing that. It's tricky. These changes are tricky, but I can really hear some determination and some commitment there. So good luck, and I look forward to seeing you again to just see how those couple of commitments go.
Thanks. I appreciate that. It actually means a lot to feel like you get where I'm coming from. Yeah, it's definitely going to be tricky. This isn't how I usually operate, but I think it's worth a try. I'll do my best with those pauses and that bit of rest. I'll see you next time. Thanks again.
End.
Feedback on your session. Strengths. This was an outstanding demonstration of motivational interviewing skills woven seamlessly into a compassion-focused therapy approach. You maintained a strong MI spirit throughout, empathetic, collaborative, and non-judgmental. Your reflections were particularly powerful, especially when you acknowledged the client's fears around losing their edge, while also exploring the exhaustion and burnout that came from their current coping strategies. You were highly effective in drawing out change talk, particularly when you gently highlighted the client's curiosity about self-compassion and helped connect their exhaustion with the possibility of trying a different approach. Your summarizing was also excellent, capturing the client's ambivalence and progress in a way that validated their feelings and built momentum toward action. Areas for improvement. One minor area to strengthen could be to lean into affirmations a little more. You did acknowledge the client's courage and effort, but a few more moments to highlight their bravery or persistence, especially when they expressed vulnerability, might have deepened their sense of empowerment. For example, after the client shared their fear of losing motivation, affirming how insightful and honest that reflection was could reinforce their confidence. Suggested skill to focus on affirmations. Incorporating more affirmations, particularly when the client expresses doubts or change talk, can help solidify their motivation and self-belief. A simple affirmation like, "It takes a lot of courage to even consider stepping outside of what feels familiar," can be powerful in reinforcing the client's readiness for change. This was an excellent session. You demonstrated empathy, skill, and a deep understanding of both MI and CFT principles. Would you like to try another round, perhaps with a different focus, or explore some specific skills further?